Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Literacy Podcast. Melissa and Lori love literacy. We have a very special guest with us today, Tiffany Rehbein. She is in Laramie what?
Laramie County School District 1. Yeah.
Laramie County. Yeah, I was like, it's Laramie County. Yes. So, you know what's funny is I always feel like Laramie is in, I'm always nervous about which state it's in. So why don't you share a little bit about, because my sister lives in Colorado, and I assume everybody out west also lives with her in Colorado. So
Yes.
It's just all Colorado out there.
Everything's Colorado. If it's not California, it's Colorado out there. I do love all the states, though. So, Tiffany, we are very excited to talk with you today because you are just going to share some really exciting things about your pilot in Wit Wisdom and then how you're planning to implement. And I just think our listeners are going to learn so much. So, Tiffany, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks, you guys. And I love it. I've lived in the West my whole life. It's a beautiful country. It doesn't matter if you're in Wyoming with me, if you are in Colorado. Yeah, Laramie's just over the hill. You know, we have good friends over there. So it makes, we're all good people and we all love living out here. So
I love that. Thank you also for making me feel okay about my geography skills here.
Yes. Yeah, it's Rocky Mountains. It's like, okay, we get it.
And it's funny too, because I have our notes in front of us and I'm like, it says Wyoming, but I'm really nervous to say that if it's wrong. And why would it be wrong? We talked about it already. So,
well, we're like a unicorn, right? Sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, people actually live there and I'm talking. I understand.
No, well, we are so excited to have you. Do you just want to share a little bit about yourself and what you do in Laramie?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the K-12, actually pre-K to 12, English Language Arts District Coordinator. So I am in a district office. I was a high school English teacher here in Cheyenne for over a decade, 14 years in this fantastic district and 18 years in education. I was born and raised in Montana. So to come down here, it's just been a great transition, and love the people in the school district is absolutely amazing.
Some beautiful places you've lived.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Tiffany, tell us a little bit about what's happening in Laramie with your adopting new curriculum. Where have you been? Where are you going? What's happening now?
Yeah. So this summer, you know, we knew we needed to do something different. Low test scores, stagnant test scores, you know, in ELA. And so our assistant superintendent of instruction reached out and was like, hey, you know, let's start looking into maybe some different alternatives to what we're doing. We need to see greater growth. We need to see kind of different measures of achievement and show student successes in a bunch of different ways. So, you know, this summer I kind of jumped in, and it really did just start with what's out there. Mm-hmm. We relied heavily on, you know, ed reports, the Hanover Research Group, to really help us with the background on a lot of different ways we could go. A program was one way that we were looking at. So that's kind of where the research started. And it was a whole team effort. It was me, it was my instructional coaches, it was my division of instruction. Which way are we going to go? Gathering, sifting, reading, researching to see really where we were going to land to take that next step.
Yeah. And I'm curious to think about did you have district requirements or state requirements that drove any of this as well?
Yeah. Kind of all of it, right? You know, the expectations and things that we need, you know, to understand and take steps towards meeting. Of course, district goals, I would say, more than requirements. You know, they have expectations and we have expectations here in the language arts department. So all of those, you know, kind of informed us as to what might match and what we definitely knew wouldn't match as we moved forward. Wit and Wisdom rose to the top instantly. It was green-lighted by all of the ed reports, Hanover, you know, kind of all the third-party sort of research groups that look into it. And then, and they weren't the only one, right? So we had 4, and then we kind of went, okay, which matches our district goals, which matches our ELA goals? And Wit and Wisdom really was the only one that hit everything. Like I
said, do you remember any of your goals to share?
Yeah, absolutely. One was types of text for kids was number one. At one time, I'm going to share sad stories first, and then we're going to get into the great stories. Because
as long as you promise that there's good stories to follow it up.
Absolutely. I'm meeting with a 5th grade team, and they want to buy novel sets, right? And they're looking at relevant, interesting, high engagement text for kids, right? Caldecott and Newbery Award winners, all the good books. And they're just like, yeah, kids come into 5th grade and they haven't even read a novel yet. And I'm like, whoa.
Oh my gosh.
That's not good. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So they kind of know excerpts and they might know authors, certainly no background, no very little historical context. And that's pretty concerning. So when we found something that could answer something like that, like, wow, we're going to get kids into books, and they're the good books that we're already purchasing kind of separately, right? Now we have a direct focus and a really rich content to dig into them.
Tiffany, I think that a lot of parents don't necessarily realize that their kids are in school and not actually reading books. Like what you mentioned about the excerpts, that's such a powerful thing to really drive your choices, right? Like, we don't want excerpts. We want books, we want novels, and we want a varied assortment of text. I think that parents many times are under the assumption that their kids are reading books in school, and they might be reading like a book, but like, is a book a year enough? Or, there's a lot of variations on that as well. Like, it could be like an excerpt of a book or a couple books, or time in text is what matters, as well as lots of other stuff, as you know. But I think that's important. And as a parent, parents really need to be questioning, like, what are my kids reading? What is my kid reading in school? What are my kids reading in school?
Yeah. I know when I started teaching, it was a textbook that I was teaching from. Well, when I finally found the textbooks in the closet somewhere, but that's all I had. When it was, all it is excerpts from, short stories, poems, and then excerpts from novels. And that was it. That was all I had to teach with. And that was kind of the norm then, at least. Not that I liked it. It was just what I had.
I know. Tiffany, I'm wondering, as you went through this process, like, I'm sure that you involved lots of stakeholders, and what did you feel like you needed to know from them? And, I'm sure you asked for feedback too. Like, what feedback did you get? What feedback did you crave?
Yeah. We wanted to really know. So let's think stakeholders. And this is a really important piece as districts and schools want to roll this out. Who needs to be involved? Who wants to be involved? And then you asked it, right? What do we need to know from them? Then what's that next step? The footfall is, what are we going to do about it? So man, we identified our key groups, of course, our students, our teachers, our faculty, right? Our school-based people. But there's a huge high interest in this community. We're about, between 60 and 70,000 in the town, pretty small, right? And just like a lot of places, especially smaller places, the schools are the center of the towns. And so community members, parents, their voices matter, and they help us shape who we are. And so, what we needed to know from teachers and students obviously was very different from parents and community members. So when we reached out, we have a parent advisory council for the district. Each school then has kind of their parent advisory groups as well. So I filtered information to principals to get to those school groups. And then I presented to the district level sort of PAC groups. And they reached out to me then after that with tons of questions. They attended school board meetings, and what we wanted to know was what, as parents and community members, what does literacy look like for you? What does it look like for our community? And then for the future of your children and our children as they grow up. And we want them to stay here. So what does literacy look like, and how can we help achieve those goals? An interesting point about our community and parent survey, 3 years ago, secondary was adopting. So Melissa kind of mentioned the textbook, right?
Yeah.
Route people thought we were going to go, and teachers were like, no, we need novels. We want the richness, so that's the route we took. I had 3 parent/community responses on that survey 3 years ago. This year we had 67.
Wow.
The elementary adoption. 7 of them were like, call me, reach out. I want to talk to you one-on-one. So I was able to have those really intimate conversations to hear what they had to say. And they shared with me these beautiful stories that are kind of the nuances of education, right? My students in special education, he's never been exposed to something like this. Like, how can we guarantee that he's going to get the same information as everybody else? Was one. Others, a lot of questions about the books. What are my kids going to be reading and why, and how is that going to help them become better citizens and humans?
That's great.
Very good questions, right?
Tiffany, you said that the types of texts were one big draw towards Wit and Wisdom. Were there other things that were different from what you were already doing that really would help you make that shift towards where you all wanted to go?
Oh, absolutely. I think the next big thing is the writing piece. When I took this position, that was one of the goals that was shared with me from, my direct supervisors was, man, the writing curriculum, what are we going to do? So part of this shift was moving from a balanced literacy and people familiar with that understand how the approach to writing and that. And then again, students not being able to compose complete pieces. I primarily taught 10th grade. I ended up teaching a concurrent enrollment 12th grade at the end of my time at the high school here in town. And same thing, 10th graders are coming in and we're needing to back up to sentence level sorts of constructions and build from there with 10th graders. So imagine the excitement, 5 years from now, when upper elementary or in high school and high school teachers can kind of celebrate this. So we love the idea that it's going to extend higher. But the integration of writing and the approach to writing, fantastic and beautiful. And in our early implementation, the instructional coaches and I are working we're kind of scaffolding it to this high level implementation guide. Reading and writing are the 2 places we're directing teachers first. Read through this, then jump into the materials through that lens. Then let's come back together and talk about, our approach. And as the training provided by Wit and Wisdom will help them kind of start to sew those pieces together a little bit more firmly.
Absolutely.
We saw the same thing with writing in Baltimore. Our elementary students were not doing a ton of writing. And if they were, it was very disconnected from their reading curriculum. It was 2 separate curricula, right, Lori?
It was,
and then the reading.
It was, and it was almost like the writing was almost like square peg round hole. Jigsawed into the reading, but it was a little bit forced. It didn't necessarily perfectly fit, and that's really hard to do when you're trying to meet standards where you're asking students to write about text and use textual evidence in every single thing that they do. And I what ended up happening is that it ended up straying away from that, at least, from my view, because it was not integrated, as you just mentioned, Tiffany. Like I always say, integrated, not isolated. And when it's isolated, it's just totally out there and separate. And when it's integrated so beautifully, it's kind of like Melissa, like we talked about, with UDL in a previous podcast. It's so seamlessly integrated that it's almost like you don't even notice that it's so beautifully done and woven in there until almost like looking back on hindsight,
Yeah, absolutely. So Tiffany, you guys are doing a pilot right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So,
a pilot in COVID, we should say that.
A pilot during COVID.
In COVID. Like big cheer for Tiffany and team because they did not back down. I can't good work for pushing forward and not waiting and giving your students what they deserve in a pandemic. I am so proud of you.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. Our district, we chose, to go face-to-face, of course, in collaboration with the State Department and to go face-to-face from the start and, with CDC protocols in place. And that decision has helped us get to where we are, right? And so while at first, let's just say first semester, we couldn't necessarily be in classrooms, as things progress and all of those things are kind of happening with the pandemic, it's like, here we are. And we're doing great things for kids and they are excited. So we have actually 19 pilot groups because we were getting a lot of questions from teachers that we couldn't answer without putting it in place.
Right.
So we have every grade level covered, K through 6. Our district is divided into triads. And so each triad has at least one school represented. Every grade level, super excited. And some of them, have been up and at it for a month now. And there were a couple of reasons to this. One, we wanted student response, right? 2, we have district questions we needed answered. And 3, to get the teachers comfortable. So those pilot groups are up and running. I debrief. They're facilitated by me. I have the 6th grade group. I have 3 instructional coaches. They've each taken grade bands. So they, we started with the module lesson study, then the lesson planning, using the protocols provided, and then they're off and running. And they get check-ins at least every 2 weeks. And then I check in with my people on the off 2 weeks of those. So
there's lots of regular and ongoing communication and different structures for that.
Absolutely.
That's so good.
The next step with that is how might we use these people to inform the whole district, right? How do we move from very manageable kind of small to, okay, now everybody needs to know this information. So one way is I do kind of have my list of district questions. What's our report card going to look like? What's our grade book look like? And then kind of the nuanced skills of teaching, right? How do the kids like the books? How is the writing going? Who's engaged? Pacing, instructional minutes, right? So we're able to answer kind of a both and district and site level questions. And then we do have a plan to have those teachers get with grade band teachers through especially early on in the school year, but continuing next year to share their expertise in learning.
That's great. So like a little feedback loop, ongoing feedback loop. That's good. So I'm curious because you just mentioned that, teachers were like, no, we don't want textbooks. We want books, right? So then you realize like you choose Wit Wisdom. And then in our pre-call, you mentioned the teacher said before teaching, the kids won't be able to read the texts.
Yeah.
There's a little conflict there. So can you share how that's going? Because I think teachers no kids need books, but then when you actually see a grade level book and you're looking at your class of students, it might be a little bit daunting.
Absolutely. Right. That's the beauty of the science of teaching that Wit and Wisdom offers support on. And then in my mind, it just aligns so beautifully with that teacher autonomy and that teacher expertise and knowledge. And that ways to get kids interested, first of all, right? As you guys know, the ability to bring in the artwork, the videos, the, short poetry pieces, all these things as teachers that we know, but we kind of go, oh, we're running a little short on time. I'm going to skip through this stuff and we're just going to kind of jump to this and realizing all of the tiny pieces that are attached to that piece that you skipped. That's what's cool. When I know one of the coaches was like, man, they put up that first piece of art and the kids' eyes were big and they're just on the edge of their seats. They're like, whoa, some of them have not even seen something like that before.
Right.
And so just exposure and then boom, they're instantly interested. And
they're building that vocabulary, and they're building that vocabulary and knowledge so that then they can access the harder texts, which I think is really important to keep in mind, especially in a pilot where your teachers are looking at a more complicated text or a more challenging text. And that's not in isolation. It's again, integrated with all these other texts that are beautifully surrounding it with knowledge and vocabulary, which we know students need to access it. And also they're practicing, fluency along the way. So they're getting plenty of practice and exposure to the content and the texts. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, because it's a mix of things, right? And it's also, we're not just sitting down with this book that, I don't even know how to manage it and maneuver through it. It's like, oh, all of these pieces come together and it's woven so beautifully. And you just listed all those off and I just love hearing that.
Yeah. It's funny in the sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
I was just like, so were the kids able to read the books?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's just it, right? They're just like, oh, we have And I get why these things happen, right? We've set our bar and yet we've been kind of maybe only achieving halfway to that bar. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, why did we not give them opportunities? Did we not give them the right opportunities? Yeah, they love it, and those cutoff points, right? It's like, oh, and now we're going to transition to this. And kids are like, no, I want to know what happens next. I'm into this. I'm excited. So yeah, the kids are in it. They're excited. They're wanting more the next day.
And I think too, I think Wit and Wisdom does a great job. This is that UDL conversation again of scaffolding. Oftentimes we end up scaffolding to the point where the kids aren't actually doing the work, right? So we're just making it super easy for them. Whereas in Wit and Wisdom, all those things you just brought up of getting into the artwork first and watching the video and learning some of the background knowledge, learning some of the vocabulary actually gets them prepped and ready to read that more difficult text.
Yeah, that is scaffolding.
Yeah, scaffolding it up instead of down.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. And, there's also so many other pieces, right? All the writing models and the content stages. They're all scaffolds that are embedded within that aren't necessarily an in-your-face, separate box. This is a scaffold. Unless you're really, really thinking about it in a different way, which I do believe takes so much hindsight or even hindsight practice, you have to go back and look at it. Because I remember Melissa and I sitting there in first glance, you're just trying to absorb the content, and it's different than what you've seen before. And you don't necessarily think about it in that way. So it kind of takes a moment to train your brain a little bit in hindsight to think, well, those content stages really are scaffolds. Every time students notice and wonder and organize their thinking, they're scaffolding their way to building knowledge in order to be able to write about something, which really is, the end goal, to write and speak about something, to have deep knowledge on a topic. It's very cool.
Yeah, I love hearing that. The content, I love that you brought up content stages. We've set some district goals around, of course, just instruction in general. And then we have a programmatic goal, and the content stages, that's our programmatic goal. You don't have to know everything out this year, but man, if you know these and understand the purpose behind the students needing to go through each step of those, we're going to be really good by the end of the year as we move into year 2.
Exactly. I'm curious, do you have any stories to share about, any teachers have shared stories with you about piloting and, students in texts and for they're able to read it, or any work that they thought that students maybe previous to implementing couldn't do, but now they see that they can do this with access or what opportunity, I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I love telling stories and I love hearing stories and I love reading stories. So this is my question, right? With 19 schools and, upwards of 40 sections using this, just story after story, right? So a couple jump out to me, and one has to do with our students with disabilities. This was a parent concern, not just a single parent, and it's also in what ways are we meeting the needs of students with disabilities in our core classroom instruction? And so a gal in a 5th grade pilot, she's like, hey, I have 24 students, pretty average class size, 18 are on an IEP, just how, the staffing worked and the class placement and all of that. She's like, I don't know, we're already 4th quarter and they're rolling out module 1 so that they can dip their toes in. So then they're ready to do it again in the fall.
Got it.
And she's like, they've really never seen text like this. They're writing words, maybe not even sentences, right? So that we do, the coach does her 2-week check-in and she's like, oh my gosh, the structure of the program, the approach to reading and writing, the supports that are suggested, and then, again, teacher expertise. She's like, they love it. They have written longer pieces, more sentences, more correctly than she's seen in these kids all year. And then in her career, she's like, it's unbelievable. I would have never guessed it. I was scared to death to try it and to trust it. And then here we are with these kiddos, what are we going to write today? And, can I can I write this today? And just things that she just hasn't seen, and excitement, and of course, student achievement and knowledge base just growing exponentially in these weeks that she's had the kids working in this.
And can I just point out, like you just said, that was 5th grade, right?
Yes.
So this is, they did not have the K through 4 parts of Wit and Wisdom. You said 4th quarter, which is really hard to introduce something in 4th quarter.
Yeah.
And a majority of students with an IEP, and they still saw that. I mean, that and COVID, right? So we have all these reasons why it could be like, this is just a disaster and not going to work, but it was still really positive and saw results. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And I have one more, because everybody has different needs, right? And different focuses in their own classroom. And so because of COVID, we were able to bring in iPads for every student in the district, K-12. And some teachers, that's what they love. Like, yes, the technology, the kids have it, like, let's use it and let's make it meaningful. And so she had adapted the vocabulary pieces. You have your 5 words. This was a 3rd grade classroom. You have your 5 words. So she had used, an app to present the words to the kids, so they would do some whole group work. And then the kids would individually on their iPads do some work, so she could quickly check in formatively and see what they understood and didn't understand about the words. And then, of course, the practice writing the sentences. And so she was really easily able to adapt, kind of the traditional writing it, with paper pencil to the iPads, and really quickly see what kids knew and didn't know at the time, and move forward. And then the kids love it too, right? Another sense of an engagement piece to kiddos. It's a little different for them, different in a good way, and so they're both hooked into the tech pieces that make sense for learning, as well as the content pieces, so that they can, move through the text that's upcoming.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that she also felt empowered to keep the content at the level that it was written, right, for their grade level, but then used the technology to support that instead of bringing the content down to like fit into the technology box. Like, she really used the technology to support driving students' access of the content. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love it. And my group that I'm working with, so I'm at 6. So I'm just thinking about the text questions, right, that are provided. And she instantly, this was the 2nd day. So she did module 0. And then because of our schedule, she was only able to be in the 2nd day of module 1. And I'm like, pluses and minuses, like, what are you seeing and not seeing? She goes, student questions, 2nd day, right? So she's been with them for 3 quarters already. She said, they're asking questions I've never heard them ask. And she's like, I know more about what they know and don't know really more quickly than I have, all year long, just from such a seemingly simple, kind of small timed piece of the lesson. And she's like, I can't believe it. And she's like, kids are asking questions who've never asked questions before. So yeah, just super, super great stories from everywhere. And these are schools. This school is a title school. It's a small school as well, up to, one of the biggest elementary schools. And so just a wide range of student needs and students enrolled in each school.
It's so funny, because I was just thinking of, the students seem like they're in this place with this curriculum where it's like a safe place, right? They can ask those questions. They can, try things they've never tried before. And I think it's funny, because I think that's also what you all are doing with the pilot, in like, letting the teachers try something, learning from what you're trying. I think it's just it's a nice, it sounds like you set up a really nice system-wide of learning, right? We're all just here to learn and get better, and it's a safe place to do that. So sounds like you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
I also love that you're focusing on the students and their growth and observations of students, because I think that that's really what shifts practice and what creates buy-in for teachers and leaders. Like, seeing students produce writing that they've not been able to produce before. I mean, I don't know what could speak greater volumes than that. Having students participate in Socratic seminars and have deep, meaningful, engaging conversations about topics that they've like probably never heard of, read about, learned about ever before. And now they're speaking about them like little experts. That's incredible. And then they can go write about them. And then just like really empowering teachers to use that technology, like as you shared, like now that you have it, to use it to support that. You know, I mean, I think it's going to be so exciting when your teachers get really comfortable with all of this, how they're using like the iPad to have students, you know, prepare for their Socratic seminar, or how they're having use the iPad to have students like record their fluency stuff or record their voice, you know, in response to questions in order to help them write about something down the road. Like there's so many and I'm not like an expert in technology by any means, but there's a lot of opportunities that I think are presenting themselves now because of the pandemic and everything and the way that we've had to shift. It's just really exciting. And I can't wait to hear more about, you know, what happens in your full implementation as folks are really, really comfortable with this.
Yes, I'm excited too. I love it.
I was just going to ask about what happens next.
Yeah. I was like, tell us more.
Plan? What's the plan for next year?
Yeah, that is great. So we were able to have the Wit and Wisdom training, the lead and the module lesson study for our principals, you know, and of course, any other kind of administrative level. And then we asked that they bring a lead teacher from each of their schools. So some of the bigger schools brought more than one, so that we could begin those collaborative conversations, so that they could then have site-based discussions and make decisions at those levels appropriate to their staff and their student population. So then now, like, where's the rest of the teachers? So launch and module lesson study are coming up this summer. I think I honestly believe that we are at about a 92%. Yes, we're going to attend, you know, and we're in the position, you know, to the professional development, you know, if we're going back to goals, that was one of one of my goals for people. How can we support them in all the ways they need to be supported? So the Wit and Wisdom training. Then coaches and I are holding either the focusing question protocol this summer for people who've already gone through the training, or because people are going to be at different spots, right? Some are going to be able to jump in pretty independently and move through that, and some offer our support. So big training, district level training. We do have a district PD day before school starts. So again, getting our feet in. Materials are already here, so they're able to kind of leaf through and jump in at different spots. And then in our rollout, it's just, we have the great opportunity. There's a couple of district PD days throughout the year we're able to utilize, as well as offer our district level support. And then supporting our principals as leaders in this. They're going to do an observation so that they have some key things to look for. So yeah, this first year is a lot of, you know, we have 3 goals and we have the training to support that, and let's just roll it out. We're going to offer monthly grade level meetings. We have Microsoft Teams as a communication spot to ask questions. So just tons of support and collaboration and dialogue, and put it in practice, and let's come back and talk about it, and then, you know, make adjustments that we need to.
That's great.
So good. I'm excited to hear about it, you know, down the road. You'll have to come back on.
Absolutely.
But I'm also really excited because I do think that as a district leader, you're really modeling, you know what the protocols are. That's huge. You know, when leaders get their hands dirty, if you will, you know, you're in the trenches with the teachers, with the leaders, you're learning these protocols, and you know what it takes to execute them. Like, I remember the first time I sat down on my sofa and did the module study protocol, it took me like 4 hours because I did it for Melissa. We were 8th grade. So I did it for 8th grade. So I'm reading I'm not reading like a quick kindergarten book, right? Yeah. So let's start there. But then you're in the but then by the time I did that module study protocol for, you know, module 4, it was like 90 minutes, maybe a little long, you know, and the way that so you're internalizing right now the structure and the content, right? At some point, the structure is going to be familiar to you in all of the protocols, and then the content will shift and change, but you know, in year 2 the content stays the same, so everything becomes a little more familiar. But I really just want to say, for anyone from Laramie listening, like, you're really lucky to have a leader who is in there with you. This is great, like, modeling of leadership practices, and I just want to commend you for that. And you know, if I can link the protocols when we post this, I will, because we've talked about them a lot. We talked about them in a previous podcast with Daisy, right, Melissa? With Daisy from KIP SoCal. She's all in the protocols, and knowing how to prepare to teach as well as that professional development is really critical. Like when you all go through launch and module and lesson study, the fact that your teachers are going to be familiar with the protocols is going to be so helpful. They're going to feel it's familiar, and they're going to feel more comfortable with the content, and then just be able to learn even more deeply about, what's coming and what they'll be doing. So that's exciting. I want to mention one thing before we move on, or if we're going to move on, but I know that one of the things that you shared for your implementation goals is that all kids will be included in Tier 1 instructional time. And I just really, really, really wanted to talk about that a little bit. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sometimes our systems and our structures lead us to make decisions that we may not even realize are happening, right? And one of the noticings that I had right away was just in general was when kids don't know. So we've done no teaching, right? We only kind of know, we just got our class. We're kind of like, okay, when's our intervention time? When are we going to pull these kids out? When are we going to, have to have, vocab time, whatever it is. And I'm kind of like, well, where's the instructional piece, and again, I'm going to share a sad story first, because then there's a celebration story, right? And I'm had the opportunity to visit a school, and it's their core in ELA time, and there's like 5 empty desks, and I'm kind of going, okay, this is really interesting. Tell me about this. And so the same things that we talked about a little bit, right? Well, they can't access the text, and they can't, and so now we can pause and take a breath and say, you know what, we're changing our structures, we're changing our system a little bit, so that we can see what they can achieve. And I already shared a couple of celebration stories of that. Others of that, now we're having the conversations of how might extra support, because we know kiddos need extra support, absolutely. Not just students, on the lower end, but also high achieving students, right? Mm-hmm. So how can that look different now? And those are the conversations we're suddenly starting to have. The can statements, and how can we provide this for students? And so the Tier 1 instruction, that everybody receives the same thing, so that we're on a level playing field. Then we can start making decisions about really, really targeted places to jump in with kiddos to help them be successful in all the different ways that they need to be successful. I'm really excited. The teachers are excited. It's a shift, and it's a good shift, because we're focused on the cans and what could and might happen next. And that's exciting, to see the kiddos' faces and have them all together and make instructional decisions with everyone in mind.
That's great. We talk a lot, Tiffany, about like shifting teachers' mindsets and how that can be hard sometimes, right? And you're talking about a lot of shifts here. I'm just, some teachers get, they're really comfortable with the way they are teaching, or they don't know why we would move from one thing to another. I'm just wondering if you are thinking about any of that, learning from your pilot group. Is that on your mind as you move?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I was working, with the assistant director of instruction, and, he's very linear. He's like, we should create a document that says, this is kind of what we were doing. This is what we're going to do now. And this is why we're going to do it. So people have that visual. And there's a couple things with that shift. Everyone has worked so hard, and again, because of the system we had in place, they had to do some things to make that system work. So a lot of people have put in time and energy into things in order to be successful. And
can I just ask, the things that you're talking about there, since you said you were balanced literacy, I'm assuming you're referencing leveled reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Or like homemade curriculum, homemade assessments. Things like that. Okay, I just want to make sure our listeners know what we're talking about here.
I'm glad. I love that.
Shifting big practices.
Yes, right. Common formative assessments. Good stuff. Good stuff. You just don't need to do it anymore. So how can we still honor that work and honor your integrity, your being the teacher's integrity and expertise, and help them make this transition. That all of that isn't lost. They still need to understand what they're assessing, why they're assessing it, and how they're going to use it to help students, right? So the framework of all of that work is still there. Now the celebration in that, in my mind, is we can focus on other things now. We can really focus in on, okay, you have all your kids in your classroom. How might you meet their needs? You don't need to be spending your time pulling text anymore, day after day after day. It's there. So now what might we focus on to still use, their brilliant minds and their expertise and their backgrounds to, still have students be successful in their rooms. So yes, the shifts, that's big, and that's cultural also, right? I mean, there's a lot attached to those shifts. So just, still knowing they still have their autonomy and their brilliance, and yes, let's tap into it in a new way now.
Yeah. And there's still so much work to be done. I remember you hear sometimes it's like, oh, you just want me to read a script, when it is a lot more than reading a script.
Yeah.
The first year I implemented a high quality curriculum, I mean, it was still so much work for me to do what you're saying, right? It was me internalizing it. And then how do I meet the needs of my students? And I didn't have to worry about everything else. I just had to worry about those things, which is still a lot. And I think it's the good work, right? Of how do I really make this work for my students?
Yeah.
I love that. That is the good work.
The good work.
The good work. Well, Tiffany, speaking of good work, you're doing lots of good work, and we would love for you to leave our listeners with a really good piece of advice as we come to a close in our. I can't believe it's coming to a close, but we would like to invite you to come back on at some point after you've implemented.
Yeah.
Yes. I definitely will accept that offer. You guys are great. I've listened to all your podcasts, and they're engaging and entertaining, and I learn something every time, and I love that. So yes, I will definitely take you up on it. I think the biggest piece of advice I would leave with people is your plan. So for us, it was kind of study, come up with a plan, and then I want to add the word listen in there, and then act on it. And there's different ways to listen at different times. That to me, the feedback I got from parents, community, school board, teachers was, we felt like when you asked us something, it's because you really wanted to know what we had to say. And then something came back around. A decision was made, and with the rationale that all of these voices were heard. So to me, it would be set up structures where you're able to listen and then act on that in a way. And as you know, everybody has a varying opinion. So it might not be what everybody wanted, but everybody had a chance to inform, and then a decision was made using their voices in that way. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Don't be afraid to get out there and listen, and then act on it in an appropriate way that's right for your district and your community and your schools and your kiddos.
Absolutely. I do a lot of work with continuous improvement, and you just talked all about it. So
Right. Exactly.
Love it.
That's so good. Well, thank you so much. I feel like this is Melissa and I are always talking about Baltimore. We're a really massive district. And so this is nice. It's so nice to talk with others so that we can provide different lenses for listeners. Here, if you're also in a large district, Melissa and I share a lot about Baltimore. That's a really good mirror, but it's really also important if you're in leadership to think about what this looks like on a smaller scale, because it might be representative of what happens in your school building, on a smaller scale. So that might be a window into that world. So thank you for being either a mirror or a window to those who are listening. And we appreciate your voice and all your expertise today.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. This has been great.
Thank you. Well, we will set a time up to meet again next year, maybe this time.
Sure. I love it. I'll be here.
Yeah. Good luck with the implementation.
Thank you.
Go team. Thanks, Tiffany. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.